everyone. Welcome to the third session of the 2022 Volunteer Engagement Series. My name is Sydney Chautreau, and I am the Director of Volunteer Engagement at the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disability. Before we get started, I wanted to remind everyone on the webinar that we are recording and video is going to be posted on the Tennessee Commission on Aging and Disabilities YouTube channel. So now's the time to turn off your cameras, which I believe everybody has theirs off, but in case you turn it on for some reason, now's the time to turn it off. And also remember to put yourself on mute to reduce the background noise. As I hear noises, I'll work as quickly as I can to mute people, but then it kind of throws me off my presentation. So if we could avoid that, that would really help me out. I appreciate it. Including the coworkers I have that are texting me right now. No distractions. Okay, sorry. This month we're going to talk about different ways to fundraise for your volunteer programs. We're not going to cover every way to fundraise, so I encourage you all, if you have ideas that you've done to secure funding for your programs, please type those into the chat box and I'll share the ideas with the group. While we're going to look at fundraising with the goal of raising funds specifically to support volunteers, these ideas can really be used for general fundraising or for other areas of your program to help you be successful. So don't necessarily put yourself in a box, but we are going to focus a lot of this on the volunteer side of things. Fundraising is something that I've done in my career through volunteering in my community, but I am far from an expert on the topic. There's just so much. These are just simple best practices through the research and my personal experience. So just as always, a friendly reminder, if you do like what you hear and want to use a suggestion, idea, or strategy, it's vitally important that you have support of your supervisor or management before moving forward. So now that we got through all the formal stuff, let's dive right into the presentation. So we all understand the struggle of raising money to support our mission and help the people that we serve. Part of the problem, and it might be a small part or a big part, that's kind of debatable, that we specifically have with raising funds to support volunteers starts with common misconceptions. And there's really 5 common misconceptions for volunteer programs. The first one is volunteers are free. I hope and probably know that a lot of you are laughing at that because volunteers are definitely not free. It takes a lot of time, a lot of money for specific equipment, training, things of that nature. Another one is you can't invest in voluntary efforts. Yes, you can. Volunteers only want what you want. I think we can all attest to a volunteer not bucking the system, but definitely having their opinions of how things that we have in policy may or may not be correct, or they want to see things changing. So they don't always want what we want in terms of specific ways of going about things. But the important thing to know is that volunteers do want to accomplish our mission just like we do. We just may have different viewpoints of how to get that mission accomplished. Meeting volunteers halfway is a recipe for trouble. No, I don't think so. So meeting a volunteer where they're at, especially when it comes to reporting certain things or if they need any kind of accommodation to help them be successful in their role, I don't think that's a bad thing. Now, if it's going to take more work on us, of course, which is part of the job. So it can be a struggle, but not necessarily a misconception. And then the last one is volunteer work, quote unquote, volunteer work, is what staff members just don't want to do. And we know as staff members that the things we have volunteers do, we do. We have that firsthand experience. We just don't have the time necessarily to complete, delivering 3.3 million meals all by ourselves. So we need to build that capacity. So it's not that we don't want to do it, it's that we need help doing it to achieve our mission. Along with the misconceptions or myths that stand in the way of gaining financial support for our programs. And there's about 5 myths, I believe. Let's see, what's the first one? Volunteer engagement isn't seen as a priority. Thankfully, I think this mindset is starting to shift due to the pandemic and seeing the true value of volunteer engagement. Sorry, I think this one's funny. The staff members are resistant to engaging volunteers more meaningfully, and that reduces and that reluctance, affects funders' attitudes. I think we can actively debunk this one because of our efforts to showcase and highlight our volunteers in staff meetings, board meetings, publicly, as well as work with our coworkers and educate them on best practices in working with volunteers. So we make sure other staff see volunteers as a resource, maybe not a threat to their job or not a nuisance and just, oh, this is another thing added to my job. We're able to communicate that with our coworkers and let them know that volunteers are here to help and not be a hindrance. Volunteer engagement is considered a program to provide or to serve volunteers rather than a strategy to achieve the mission. So as we look at our volunteer programs, funders see it as, oh, this is just money to support a volunteer. It's not related back to the mission at all. So this ties into kind of the impact that our volunteers have. How many hours the volunteer commits is an important data point, but it doesn't tie directly to our program's mission. But when we include the numbers of people served, services like meals and rides, recreation programs, a number of participants at the senior center, that relates directly to that relates the volunteer activity directly to the mission of our organization. You know, playlists being created, things of that nature. Leaders lack an understanding of how volunteering and giving are connected. So in most cases, and we're going to talk about this more in depth here in a little bit, volunteers are more likely to donate money to organizations that they volunteer for. Now, some of our programs are unique in that we're not allowed to accept donations. But for those of us who can, it's an important data point to collect that we may not be collecting right now. So if you can show that a high percentage of your volunteers are also donating money, say, for example, to the senior center or to Meals on Wheels or to the My Ride program, then it's going to show the funder that volunteers are invested in their success and they should consider investing in the success of the program as well. And lastly, the term volunteer, as crazy as it sounds, and I need to do better at this as I'm going through the research, the term volunteer can be very misleading. This relates back to the misconceptions that we just talked about, that a funder sees it as they can't support the free help or voluntary efforts. Later in the presentation, we're going to talk about words to use and maybe what words not to use when approaching a funder for money. And it's as crazy as it sounds, we want to limit the amount or the times that we use the word volunteer. And we're going to go over some alternative ways to describe volunteers that are more appealing to funders as well. So I won't leave you hanging there. The first way I want to talk about raising funds for our volunteers is through grants. So we'll talk about other options as well, I promise. But the process of applying for a grant is really going to help you organize why you want the funding, what the funding is going to be used for, what goals will be used or the funding will be used for, and how to evaluate to make sure that the funding was used effectively. So it's all going to tie together, but it's going to sound very, Sydney wants me to apply for a grant heavy presentation, and that's not what I'm trying to do. It's really trying to go through that whole process of finding our needs and what we're going to use that funding for. So all the steps that we're going to relate back to a form, every other form of fundraising that we're going to talk about, like events and in-kind donations. But there's 3 steps that we're going to look more in depth at for making the case to funders. The first one is we're going to prepare. Then we're going to construct a case statement. And last but not least, we're going to present our case, which sounds very judicial and we're going to court, but that's not what we're doing. There was even like a little judge hammer there on the make your case that I took out. Didn't want to be too intimidating. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is prepare, and we're going to know ourselves. So we're going to conduct an assessment, and we've talked about assessments before, and assessments are not the most fun thing for all of us to do, but they're really, really necessary when it comes to trying to figure out how we want to spend funding that we could potentially get. So what are our strengths? And as we always look at our strengths, we have to figure out what our weaknesses are as well. Are we ready? So if we get this funding and we want to increase our volunteerism, we want to have new screening processes, whatever it might be, are we ready for that? If we get this funding, are we going to have the time to do all of the things that we say that we're going to do? So having that preparation. How are volunteers already increasing your impact? Where do you have opportunities to enhance your engagement efforts? And what steps can you take? And where would you benefit from investing volunteer engagement structure, practice, and more? And there's a really great document, and I think if I can, I'm going to pull it up and show you guys. But Volunteer Strategies has a volunteer quotient assessment, and this is a really great tool to access, and I used it to assess one of my programs that I manage for volunteers. It's longer, so we won't go too super in depth. I'm hoping this is gonna allow me to do this. If I was smart, I would have already had it pulled up, but you can tell how my morning's going. Here it comes. Fingers crossed. Yeah. So we're gonna download the assessment. And you don't have to put in your email address. You just got to click it and it's gonna pop up here in a minute. But anywho, there's about 8 different categories that it looks at, including creating strategic volunteer roles, cultivating volunteers, screening and placement, support and accountability, evaluation, recognition, and acknowledgement, professional development and training, policies, infrastructure and technology, and organizational commitment to volunteer engagement. So it seems long because it's 9 pages, but there's really only a few questions per section. And what you do is you mark, you almost always do it, sometimes do it, not yet. And if you don't know if you do this or not, it's not the best thing. And then you kind of tally everything up and give yourself a score. So there's your cultivating volunteers, and it gives you a little definition at the top as what exactly the definition of cultivating a volunteer is, or screening and placement, support and accountability, definitely those things. So there's really usually only about 5 or 6 questions maximum on each of these pages. And I encourage you, whether it's for your volunteer program, your program in general, to go over, well, this is actually specifically for volunteers, so program in general is not going to work for this one. But go over this and see what your score is. And your scoring's right here at the end. And you just kind of do a good tally. It's your total out of 100. So when I did the assessment for my program, I scored myself at a 74 out of 100. Not terrible, but clearly there's some areas of improvement that are needed. The categories I scored lowest in were the policies, infrastructure, and technology, mainly because of the technology piece, and organizational commitment to volunteer engagement, unfortunately. So those are the 2 areas that I'm going to be working on, particularly for that program, and see how I can increase those scores. And it'll also, this is a great way for you to do your own assessment, and that could be where you find the category that you need to focus on those funds. See if I can get back to, here we go. Awesome. Much smoother transition than trying to pull that up. But you all have, I'm gonna, in the follow-up email, I'll send everything out in a PDF, and you'll be able to click the link and get to those resources. So if you do the assessment, let me know. I kind of want to know what your results are, and if there's any way that I can help you increase any of the scores in any of those areas, please let me know. I'm happy to be a resource. So also in preparing, we need to know the research. So research has found 5 key pieces of data about organizations that have a strong volunteer, or that have strong volunteer involvement. And I think we're going to see a lot of characteristics that our programs show and we can relate to, because we do have strong volunteer involvement in a lot of our programs. So all organizational capacities are significantly stronger for organizations with a strong volunteer management model. When organizations engage and manage any number of volunteers well, so it doesn't matter if you have 5 volunteers or you have 150 volunteers, as long as they're managed well, doesn't matter the number. They are significantly better led and managed. So we have great leadership across the state for our programs. Organizations are significantly more adaptable, sustainable, and capable of going to scale. I think we can definitely relate to this throughout the pandemic, for sure. We adapted so much, pivoted in so many different directions, completely changed the way we did things for a solid 2 years, and are still adapting to now going back to quote unquote normal, or the new normal, or however you want to say that. We're very, very adaptable across the state. Having a strong volunteer engagement strategy requires strong and well-developed human resource management practices. And I know when I talk about volunteers, there's a big human resource component, evaluating, supervising, all those things. And I try to change the words up a little bit to not make it so volunteers are employees language. But no matter what words we use, whether we use evaluation or just reviews or something a little less work related, I guess. I don't know a better word to say. It's all intertwined with human resources. And then organizations that engage volunteers are equally as effective as their peers without volunteers, but almost half of the median budget. So this really makes me think of the senior volunteer transportation network, the MyRide programs and things of that nature, compared to public transit. So, they're a volunteer program. Public transit gets way more funding, but we're able to help not necessarily as many people, but our program can help them in different ways and is just as effective to helping if not more effective, in helping the people that we serve, and we're just as effective as public transportation options. I hope you all agree with that. All right, knowing the research a little bit more, as we utilize volunteers on an annual basis, or organizations that utilize volunteers on an annual basis have a strong volunteer management model, outperform their peers in all organizational capacities. Just like the MyRide example I just gave, we outperform our peers. Knowing our history is just as important as knowing in terms of research, kind of the research methods. We have to know our history and know our research, our past as well. So I'm excited to see how all of our programs compare from the 2021 Volunteer Impact Report to this year's report that's being developed. Some of our programs may see a small dip in numbers, but with the pandemic, that's to be expected and definitely not a sign of poor management or issues that we're having in managing our volunteers. In fact, through what I've seen the data coming in, we have seen a dip in the actual number of volunteers, but the hours the volunteers have done activity has gone up exponentially. So unfortunately, we have a little bit less of a volunteer workforce, but that workforce is putting in the work and getting things done and increasing our numbers and are extremely, extremely valuable. So based on the 2021 report, we can show almost 270,000 hours of volunteer activity, which is the equivalent of, get this, 129 full-time employees. That's crazy. A full-time employee, I calculated that at about 2,080 hours if you do a 40-hour work week at 52 weeks a year. So that's how I divided that and came up with that calculation. And is worth over $7.4 million in valued labor. Of course, there's other critical data that we'll be able to compare, such as the people we served and the services provided. So it's really time versus money when we look at things like that. Research has also shown, now there's going to be some numbers here, so if I have to repeat myself, please let me know. I'll probably say this twice. Volunteers are more likely to donate and donors are more likely to volunteer. So I don't know if I don't think we've ever really talked about this, but have we asked volunteers to donate to our programs? And then if we have donors, have we asked the donors to volunteer? Volunteers are twice as likely to donate than non-volunteers, and donors are twice as likely to volunteer than the general public. Volunteers donate more. In terms of value, volunteers give on average 10 times as much as non-volunteers. So if a non-volunteer gives $10 a year, a volunteer could potentially give up to $100 a year. Donors give financially to the places where they volunteer. In fact, 70% of donors give financially to all or some of the organizations that they volunteer for. And volunteering is even more fulfilling than financially giving. So this kind of goes to recruiting our donors to volunteer for certain things. Volunteering was rated very or completely fulfilling by significantly more people than giving financially. So very interesting data points that we're going to explore a little bit more as well. So know that research. In constructing a case statement, fair warning, all of this slide is all words, and it makes me cringe thinking about how I couldn't find a better way to present this information. I'm breaking the cardinal rule of having wordy slides and possibly even reading slides. So please, please forgive me. I'm going to try and go through this, not quickly, but fairly quickly, just because I don't like how I did this. Anywho, sorry, I digress. Case statements communicate the rationale, need, focus, and vision of what we will be or how we'll be different because of an initiative and why you're seeking the funding. So in order to develop a compelling case statement, the following 9 questions, I know that's a lot, are important to answer and will provide you with the information that you need. So we're going to try and go through 3 questions at a time. So the first one is, what problem or need are you trying to address or resolve? So are you trying to make sure every older adult has a nutritious meal? Or are you trying to make sure that individuals in nursing homes have music available to them that can help them with behavioral issues? Whatever your issue is that you're trying to resolve, make sure you know what that problem is and can well define it. Who or what is affected? So older adults, for a majority of us, are going to be our target audience. Maybe it's rural older adults or a minority group of older adults. The more specific you can be, the better. How can volunteer involvement help to address this problem? Well, we can serve more people, right? Of course, being more specific than just that. And then the skills and talents that you're going to be able to build through the volunteer program. How are you already engaging volunteers? So are you going to continue to engage volunteers the same way you already are? Or is the funding going to help you increase that involvement or address a different need, potentially? How are the volunteers already making an impact, and be specific about that? So that's where our data points are going to come in. Have volunteers in the past helped serve more people? As data is coming in for the new report, we found that there was an increase of 40 volunteers as of right now. More data is coming in. There was an increase of 40 volunteers for the nutrition program. And in return, there was also about a 300,000 meal increase from last year. So granted, did those 40 volunteers deliver 300,000 meals? Probably not fully just on those 40 people, but we can say that an increase in the capacity of our volunteers contributed to being able to serve an additional 300,000 meals this year. That's huge. How's your organization unique in addressing the problem? Uniqueness is hard to define. I'm going to go back to the My Ride program that I think is very unique as we compare to other programs like the public transit, even Uber and Lyft. My Ride is the only, and I believe this is correct, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone with the My Ride program or Senior Volunteer Transportation Network, they're the only, I say we, they, are the only program that does door-through-door service. Other programs are curb to curb, maybe door to door, very rarely. But that means the older adult has to come out of their home and get in the vehicle without assistance. My Ride is the program, yay, correct, smiley face, awesome. My Ride's the program where a volunteer can go into the home and help the individual to the car in most circumstances. So that is a unique component to our program that may not be replicated through other services that older adults have access to. So think of it that way. What's the desired outcome? How many people are you wanting to increase? How many deliverables are you hoping to increase? And how is that funding going to help you do that? Will the cost reach your desired outcome? So this is where a budget comes in. And I got to tell you, budgets are not my strong suit. We have a great fiscal department and a lot of people who have more experience with budgets than I do. So if you're looking for a grant, or even if you're looking to just ask your supervisor or your boss or your executive director for an additional amount of money for XYZ reason, make sure you have a budget and let them know where that money is going, and include those in-kind resources. So include, we have 200 volunteers and on average they volunteer 10 hours a month. So right there's 2,000 hours a month, 24,000 hours a year at XYZ amount of money. You see where I'm going with this. In-kind services, the local service station donates 10 oil changes a year that we give to our volunteers who've given the most rides, something along those lines. And which donors and funders are you going to look to for support and why? So I am going to share with you some of the funders in Tennessee and nationally that have in the past supported some volunteers. So I will give you at least a starting point. Not saying that guaranteed you're going to get money from those sources. I can never guarantee that, but at least you'll have a starting point of somewhere to look. All right, done with the slide that gave me anxiety all night. So presenting your case. We want to be specific. So I'm going to go over just one do and one don't when making your case and presenting your case to a funder. What we want to make sure that we do is request funding that will empower volunteers to expand the reach of your mission. So I'm going to MyRide a lot for my examples because I really like that program, and I feel like so much can be toward MyRide. So I don't mean to ignore any other program or think that, no one think that MyRide's my favorite, because all the programs are my favorite. I love them all uniquely. But maybe in terms of this empowering volunteers to expand the reach, may sound something like transportation is critical, or transportation to critical medical appointments, grocery stores for basic needs, and local community organizations for social connectedness with friends and family has become a barrier for many older adults across Tennessee. We're seeking funds to extend our support to over 1,000 adults, 60 years of age and older across the state who live independently but do not drive. Expanding the number of community volunteers through more targeted recruitment and strengthening their skills through additional formal training to provide safe, senior-friendly transportation will allow us to expand, increase, and enhance our overall services to the people we serve. Could I be more specific? Absolutely. Including data points and things of that nature would be great in that statement. And I probably should have and asked my lovely MyRide folks who are sending me smiley faces through the chat for more specifics. But this statement relates directly back to our mission and our guidelines of the funding opportunity and is more appealing to the funder. Now, on the other side of things, on the other hand, please try to avoid, I hate using like do and don't, but don't approach the funders with a budget to support the infrastructure of running a volunteer program. This shows a focus on the organization and not the people that you're trying to serve. So try to avoid a statement like, we need funding to support a position for a volunteer coordinator so the program runs smoothly and more effectively and our volunteers have more organized or have a more organized and successful experience. Can you see why the funder would like the empowering statement over an infrastructure statement? Definitely the second statement's not as mission-driven, mission-focused. Prepare for objections. So you're not always going to get an immediate yes, right? If you do, congrats. Please share your proposal, all of your language, and everything that you did to get that money. Please share it with us, and we will give you all the credit, but we will steal and use what you've done to help us as well. We're just sharing. We're all givers, right? So it's possible for a prospective funder that a prospective funder just doesn't know or understand the value of volunteers and their abilities. So we have to do some education. Funders may have had bad experiences that have shown volunteers are unreliable and that we could find ourselves investing more in the volunteers than the people that we serve. So it's our job to change the narrative and share our truth, or in my opinion, the truth, and say something along the lines of, I'm sorry you've had a bad experience with volunteers. Our organization does a very thorough job of screening and selecting volunteers for the right position. We hold volunteers accountable, and we treat them as partners in the organization's mission. We're tremendously successful with volunteers carrying out our commitments that they pledge to do. So we can, through our experiences, through the stories that we have, through our volunteer testimonies, we can prepare for those objections. And if they have some reason that they don't want to fund our programs, we'll be able to have that supporting documentation of, we understand your concerns, we understand your position. However, for us, it's different. We can show you that what you've experienced in the past is not what we're currently experiencing. Oops, wrong button. And then sustaining the work. So we've talked many times that volunteers are motivated by meaningful work and how what they do for our programs relates back to the mission. How many times have I said that already? Relating back to the mission. I feel like it should start being a drinking game with water, drinking game with water, even though it's St. Patrick's Day, drinking with water until after work. While the number of volunteer hours is important, that's not the only data point that we want to collect. In terms of relating to funders, yes, they want to know that in-kind contribution of the volunteer service and that return on investment, but that's very limiting on the true impact that our volunteers and programs have as a whole. Outcomes are what the volunteers and the general public want to see and hear about, and so do the funders. So there lies the true impact of how we help the people that we serve. Things like people we reached, meals served, rides given, visits conducted, music playlists created, people counseled, phone calls made, resources provided, exercise classes conducted, health screenings done, and so much more. I hope the information that we've collected in the annual report can help you show the program's outcomes over the years. And we'll be able to show improvements and increases in the number of people that we serve and services that we provide. That will hopefully in turn result in additional funding opportunities to continue to grow programs and support volunteers. So I know I've been asking a lot of you to report certain data to me. We're compiling all of that, so hopefully that it will help everyone in the future. It's not just so I can have the information and share it with my small group. We're hoping to be able to expand it even more than what we've been able to for this first report. We're going to expand it even more with the second report that will be completed in about a month. Woo-hoo. All right, words are important. Now this slide is wordy, but it's about words. So don't hold that against me. This one actually makes sense and doesn't make me cringe as much. So as we're, writing grants, proposals, even writing a request for funds just from the general public, just asking for donations from someone. Let's try to avoid certain words like, unfortunately, volunteer, charity. We hope, the word hope. It's kind of like, if you do fund us, that's great. But if you don't, we're still going to try and be able to do things. So try not to be wishy-washy about it. Be like, when we get this funding, have that confidence factor built in. It's funny how in one of the slides, the wordy slide, it says, how are we going to be unique to funders? Where in the research, something to avoid saying in proposals is things like innovative and unique and groundbreaking and state of the art, because it's so specific that, are you actually one of a kind? Are you the only person in your area, your state, your region, your county that are doing this? Some of us, like, again, My Ride, Senior Transportation or Senior Volunteer Transportation Network, can say that, yes, we are unique in door through door. Some other organizations aren't necessarily that unique in the services that we provide, but we may be able to find an innovative or unique way that we're providing a service. So if you can truly use those words, use them. If it's like, oh, not so much unique, there's about 5 other organizations doing the same thing, we might want to try to avoid that. So instead of volunteer, maybe citizen involvement or civic engagement. Those are some trigger words that funders like. Building capacity, leveraging certain things. There's a list here. Last time I clicked the link, it took a little bit longer than anticipated. But there's over 200 action words that you can use kind of interchangeably and have some varying language to any kind of proposals or requests for funding that would be good to use. I'm always, I put I want to identify, and then I'll right click and try and find a synonym because I keep using the word identify or collaborate or something like that. So hopefully I'm going to be using these action words just for emails so I don't keep using the same word over and over again. Also, funders to consider. So this is another wordy slide, but very important information. And all of these, when I send the follow-up, you'll have it in PDF, so you'll just be able to click these hyperlinks and go to these specific funders. So I'm not going to tell you all of this and then not give you the resources to find the funding to make the case, or the funders to make these cases to that we've been talking about. There's a lot of funders out there, and there's a lot of nonprofits and programs and other agencies that you're going to compete against. So as you look at these agencies on the screen and others you find on your own, please look at the details of the areas that the funders focus on and their guidelines to make sure that you qualify for the funds that you're seeking. While getting funding is great, you also need to know the requirements you'll have if you secure the funding, such as reports, goals, and other factors. How much time is it going to take you? Getting the money is great, but also the reporting, data collection, all those things take a lot of time. So that goes back to when we were talking about the assessment. Are you ready to receive these funds and the other expectations and requirements that are going to be expected of you? I don't say this to scare you from applying for any grant that you find promising, but I do want to set your expectations that it's not going to be like getting money and then being able to do whatever you want with it necessarily. If I can help in any way for anyone looking to apply for funding to support volunteers, please don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to try. I emphasize the word try to be a resource in any way that I can. The list on the screen has Tennessee specific programs and organizations and also national organizations. Another good place to research funders is Candid, which is here kind of in the national area. Some of you may have used Foundation Center or GuideStar in the past. Those were very popular sites to research funders. Those two organizations came together, I believe I read in 2019, and they formed Candid. So they joined forces to have one kind of foundation search option. A couple things to note, Tennessee Employees Charitable Campaign, that's not a foundation. It's a state program that employees, I believe it's in the fall, maybe October, November, we get an email saying, hey, the new list of charitable organizations are up, and we encourage you to donate some money to your local nonprofits, and it comes directly out of our paycheck. So anyone who's, I believe, 501c3 can join that list. So I can't guarantee you'll get funding, but it's something to look into potentially that's not going to cost you any money. And then we also have through the Community Foundation of Middle Tennessee. So I apologize. I don't think this is statewide, but it could, I don't want to say it's statewide, but it covers mainly Middle Tennessee. So I apologize, East and West Tennessee. The Community Foundation, they do the big payback, and that's usually like the first Tuesday in May, I want to say, where you can do some promotion and get some fundraising through the Community Foundation. So I'm seeing someone type in, if anyone has any other funders that they've had success with, any other recommendations, please put those in the chat box and I'm happy to share with the group. So applying for grants is not easy. So we're going to switch gears a little bit and look at some other ways to fundraise. Grants take a lot of time to develop and the goals and the reporting, the data tracking to keep up with. So like I mentioned in the beginning, everything we've talked about so far aligns more with grant writing, but it's all still relevant when it comes to other fundraising options as well. This just came in. West Tennessee does the 731 Give, similar to the big payback, and that's through United Way. So West Tennessee folks, you have the 731 Give. Thank you. Very helpful. As I go through a few other fundraising ideas, I encourage you all again to type in the chat box ideas, events, or strategies that you've used to fundraise for your organization. And it doesn't have to be necessarily for the volunteer program, but think at this point, in my opinion at least, I think at this point we can't rule out any ways to try and secure more funding. So let's throw some things against the wall and see if they stick. So turning volunteers into donors. Has anyone done this? Let me know in the chat box, yes or no, if you have volunteers that donate to your program. And again, some of our programs are unique and can't do this, but if you can, here we go. So asking for money can be awkward or uncomfortable for many people. But again, like we talked about a little bit earlier, research shows that that volunteers donate 10 times more in value than non-volunteers, and they tend to donate to places that they volunteer for. Yay, my ride does. Awesome. Of course, my ride does. So I'm not talking about asking volunteers to spend thousands of dollars or have any kind of endowment to your program. But maybe if you do an annual donation drive or event, giving campaign, don't be shy to ask volunteers to contribute or put them on the list to get the emails, mailings, whatever it might be about donation opportunities. And I'm not only talking about current volunteers either. We should have a list of current and former volunteers, and it's okay to include them on your mailing lists too. Now, if the person specifically asked to be removed, then of course don't share the information with them. But if you have a volunteer who maybe just recently got a new job and they aren't able to volunteer for the program as much anymore, but they're still in the community, they still appreciate the mission, they still have the heart for the mission, they just don't have the time to volunteer, maybe they'd be willing to be a donor to the program. What's the worst that could happen? They say no? Well, then you're no worse off. But if they say yes, then you're in a better place. Oh, that whole 10 times thing was supposed to be back when I talked about the value. Sorry, a little bit behind. So how we ask a volunteer to make a donation is extremely important. Most of this is going to be some, thank you, Captain Obvious. Duh, Sydney, we know this kind of stuff. But think of it more as a reminder. So include tremendous appreciation for their work. Thank you. We appreciate everything that you've done, the people you've been able to serve, all that good stuff. Frame them as a supporter of the organization and the mission. The amount that they can donate doesn't matter. Any additional support is appreciated. And if they can't donate for whatever reason, we respect that decision as well. Their donation supports the work they do and other volunteers do to support the mission. This is kind of a new mindset that hasn't really been done in the past, I think, for a lot of our programs, excluding my ride, of course. But this is kind of what a lot of other nonprofits do. So it may take some time to get some buy-in from management or if you have a development team, but it's an option to explore. One other thing that might be a little controversial, but we're going to talk about it anyway. Remember that your board members are in most cases volunteers. Oh, there was a good comment. Let them know what their donation is worth. How many meals does it provide? How many trips can it support? So absolutely great point. If a meal is, just for easy math, a meal is valued at $5. If you give $25, you supply 5 meals to an older adult in your area. So absolutely, if you can tie that donation to the service, absolutely, that's only going to help increase the possibility of getting those funds. Okay, back to the board members. Remember, board members are volunteers. I've been on a board where annual giving was mandatory and a requirement to have your seat on the board. Now, I'm not saying this to change your board rules. The webinar is being recorded, so if I have proof that this idea is not a requirement, so no one can say, Sydney told me that we have to charge our volunteers and make them do an annual giving amount in order to sit on the board. This is my proof that I am not saying that. It's just an experience that I had. But there was no limit on the amount that was donated. So we had members who gave a monthly donation. We had some that gave a one-time small donation, I think as low as $5 for the year because they were a college student and didn't have a whole lot of money, but they had to meet that requirement. And others would give a huge donation at the end of the year. So it didn't scare me away from being on the board. It actually made me more invested in doing work as a board member because I felt like I was supporting the organization even more and I was invested in everything that they were doing and I was doing. Just an idea, again, not a requirement. Don't get me in trouble. So a bit of caution before we talk about events. So these type of fundraising activities can be debated as not effective when it comes to looking at the time involved and the reward at the end. An event works for one program, or event that works for one program may not work for another program. So it's not a one size fits all to fundraising by any means. So I'm sorry if you thought today you were going to get like the magic bullet. Once I figure it out, I'll be sure to let you guys know. And if you find out what the magic bullet is, please let the rest of us know. We would like to be successful just like you. A couple things to consider when planning and determining if an event was or will be successful for you is making sure you look at more than just the expenses versus income to determine success. So obviously, if you raise more money than the expenses to put on the event, that is a success, absolutely. But make sure you look at things like how much time the volunteers contributed in the planning and implementation and evaluation, or any donated items. Uh, So just make sure you count everything. Make sure donated items are also important to calculate. So if someone did free catering, if someone came and took pictures to promote the event, if you got some free radio, airtime, TV time, the space was donated, decorations, all of those things need to be considered and accounted for to see if that event was a success. So we can get extremely positive results from events, but I don't want to downplay or make you think that events are not good ideas. We just want to make sure that the event is going to be beneficial for everyone involved. So if we choose the right event for a program and they have effective volunteer leadership, maybe as the chair of the event, have staff support for the volunteer leadership, set clear goals, we're going to get some funds raised. Absolutely. There was a book recommendation in the materials and the research that I did called How to Produce Fabulous Fundraising Events, Revamp Remarkable Returns with Minimal Effort. How great does that sound? So I've ordered it, but unfortunately it didn't come in time to include in this presentation. So I guess I'm going to have to do another session on this in 2023, right? And use this hopefully awesome resource. They say it's about 200 pages. So I'm excited to get my hands on it and start looking for ways that we can fundraise to have remarkable returns with minimal effort. So a few other event ideas. Some of you may have done some of these things. Some are new ideas that have kind of popped up because of the pandemic and having to shut down a lot of annual fundraisers and in-person events. So I'm curious if you've done some of these, let me know. And again, anyone has any other ideas, either what they've done for their program, maybe what they've done for other nonprofits that they volunteer for. Again, please shout out ideas. No idea is a bad idea at this point. So have you guys heard of these t-shirt fundraisers? So I guess I have to preface this by saying I love a good t-shirt. I love when I go to volunteer and I get a t-shirt. One day I'm going to figure out someone who can make a quilt and I'm going to give them all my volunteer t-shirts and then I'll be able to wear them all at the same time. Sorry, I digress. So there are sites like Bonfire. I actually saw a commercial for them the other night, I think. Have relatively inexpensive ways that you can create a t-shirt design and raise money from those purchases. So I don't know all of the details, but they do have a t-shirt pricing calculator that you can see at the source down there at the bottom. And when I looked at it, it was something like for 50 t-shirts at $25, a t-shirt with, and again, the design is all on them. So that's kind of where they take their cut from, I guess. With one color on the front, no color on the back, it was something like $600 could be raised for a nonprofit, which doesn't seem like a lot, but depending on your needs, that could cover the expense for food for trainings or a new equipment purchase that's needed or a volunteer recognition item, something along those lines. So this would be a great fundraiser to have maybe an intern look into, or a college student or recent graduate who's looking to get some more experience in fundraising and kind of get involved in the community a little bit more. They could help with your design. If you have a local college that has a graphic design program, this could be something that maybe a class or a couple students could get involved with and help put on a fundraiser. Silent auctions. It's a great way to get local and even state organizations to support your program or your agency. I've worked on a couple of these myself. I was in charge of a silent auction for 3 years for a conference event that we did annually for a nonprofit I was the president of the board of. So I have things like draft donation letter. I have links to organizations that we have received donations from. So it does take planning and organization, coordination, all that good stuff. But it's a great event to pair maybe with a dinner or some kind of lunchtime event. So I've had places like the zoos from Chattanooga, Knoxville, Nashville, Memphis, um, museums, Dollywood, Opryland Hotel, Graceland, and other attractions from across the state donate tickets and other items to support a silent auction. So if you're interested in doing that, let me know. I can give you all the resources that I have. And like I said, it's good to pair with another. Maybe if you come to the annual pancake breakfast or you come to the barbecue dinner or whatever you have kind of already in place, maybe you tag on a silent auction item there. When I did it, we raised about $1,500, but that was for a whole about 7-hour conference day. I've seen a lot of senior centers do this as a regular activity, but could turn into a fundraiser, maybe to have a dance. I know we just had a senior center do their senior prom, which I thought was really cool. So maybe a small admission fee to support volunteers that teach class or deliver the meals or whatever's going on at the center. It can kind of be that could be the theme of the dance somehow. And it could be fun, maybe make it intergenerational and maybe for grandparents can invite their grandchildren to the dance or maybe their own children. Uh, my nieces just had their father-daughter dance, so it's kind of cool if maybe an idea for the senior center to do something similar. You know, you did it in elementary school, and now you can do it as an adult. I would go. I don't know if other people would go. There was a really big increase in virtual races during the pandemic. I've contributed to many, many nonprofits' virtual races. I love getting a medal and a t-shirt. So if you have a t-shirt or a medal, let me know. Most likely I'm going to donate to you because I love that stuff. But it's helped a lot of nonprofits who decrease the expense of having a 5K or a fun run kind of organization or fundraiser for their organization. Instead of having it in person, they're able to do it virtually. So you can do it in person, of course, but that can become more costly and involve a lot of coordination with local authorities, you know, blocking off roads, making sure traffic's not an issue, things of that nature. Having a virtual race means that people can do it wherever they're at and maybe get family and friends involved. So it's also a great way to keep people active. So it has multiple benefits. There's some services like Eventbrite that can be set up to take online payments with around, in my research, it was about a 5% service fee and then a dollar fee per order. So if you had a $25, or let's say a $10, make it easy math, a $10 registration fee, 5%, you have 50%, or excuse me, 50 cents plus a dollar order fee. So $1.50 goes to Eventbrite and you make $8.50 off of every person who registers using that service. You may already have an online payment service, so you can do registrations through the service that you already have. Or you can opt out of doing online registration altogether and just say, hey, if you want to do this, you have to bring your payment, check, cash, whatever, to the center or mail it in, and then you avoid those online fees altogether. But having some kind of race like that might be something to consider in addition to your t-shirt design. Hey, you know, $5 registration. If you want a t-shirt, here's our link to get, you know, another $20 for the t-shirt that you can do for the race. And then this last one. So this is one that I was talking to some of my coworkers about. So it's not in the research, at least not in the research that I saw, that we sort of came up with on the fly. So may or may not be a good idea. I'm curious if anyone's going to catch on to it and do it. So maybe start an adopt, support, foster, whatever word you want to use. So we'll say, adopt a volunteer or foster a volunteer, support a volunteer. For a specific donation amount, you can pick a person that you can support as a volunteer. We can make kind of a card. We kind of thought of it as like a baseball card with all their stats and stuff that we used to collect. Some of you may still collect. I don't know. With their permission, of course, always get the volunteers' permission for this, but that details who they are, what program they volunteer for, the impact that they've had, maybe how many hours they've contributed, people that they've served, services that they've provided, meals they've delivered, rides they've given, music playlists they've created, so on and so forth, visits that they've done at the nursing home, whatever it might be. So as the donor gives whatever amount it is, they get this statistic card or this baseball card for this volunteer. And we can also get the volunteer involved and ask them to help by sending a thank you card to the person that supported them. So they show that appreciation. And a majority of our funding goes mixing up my thoughts here. But that also gets the volunteer involved, shows appreciation to the donor, so the donor continues to possibly donate in the future or maybe even adopt another volunteer. So a majority of our funding goes directly to service providing. So a lot of the sources that we have for our funding right now is restricted, and we're not able to support volunteer efforts. And this would show the volunteers that people care and appreciate what they do. So I know one grant in particular, in order to provide food for the volunteers, you have to have at least 3 hours of training involved. So it's not that we can do a volunteer recognition luncheon and just have the volunteers come and enjoy. We have to tie some kind of training component to it. If we had something like this, an adopt a volunteer type program, those proceeds could go to actually being able to have someone or have an event where the volunteers can come and relax and not have to talk about the program as much. We love talking about our programs, but still. Oh, and another great point came in through the chat. If someone wants to help, but they don't have the time to volunteer, this is a great way that they can still be included. Absolutely. So those are just kind of 5 event ideas. Again, there's a whole lot more, so please share if you have any other ideas. As far as all the ideas we've discussed, they've kind of been about money. Well, not kind of. They've all been about the green, the dollars. But fundraising can also be in-kind items or in-kind services. There's a lot of corporations that will donate items instead of money that can be extremely valuable to support our volunteers. So, all the companies' logos you see here have community support programs of some kind. Most simply need a written request with details of the item and the quantity needed and the reason why. So there may be more details, of course, but it is best to go to the local store, ask to talk to the manager, have the written request in hand, and ask for whatever donation that you need. The manager, he or she, may need more details that you can provide, and hopefully you'll have a new local partnership. Maybe you need bottled water, chips, cookies, a cake for the dance that you're going to have for a fundraiser, or paper plates and drinks and assorted sandwiches for a lunch for a volunteer training. These organizations can help supply that for you at no cost, potentially. You're probably thinking, well, those are items that we don't mind spending money on in the first place because it's affordable. It's less it's less expensive than a lot of the other things that we're looking for. Well, you saved money, maybe just a couple $100 here that maybe you'd be able to spend on something else like recognition, advertising for more volunteers, doing a recruitment campaign, things of that nature. So these are not all the stores, of course, just a small taste. We also had a comment come in. Amazon Smile and Kroger donates a portion of money if linked to the Kroger Plus card. I do remember that. I got to remember what that program's called. But yeah, Amazon Smiles, I think quite a few of our senior centers have that if you do a purchase with Amazon, a small donation goes to that organization, and Kroger has a very similar. So that's a monetary contribution instead of an in-kind contribution, but absolutely great ideas. In addition to grocery stores, there's restaurants also that donate food or maybe gift cards or something along those lines. So again, small taste there on the screen. I won't go through all those um, different stores, but the link below, the link here, lists dozens. It says 400 plus. I don't think there was 400 organizations listed on the website, but definitely dozens of companies that accept donation requests. So I can't guarantee, again, that they're going to give a donation, of course, but it's worth a try. They include donations from places that you may consider for the silent auction or for what you need for events that you might put on. So there's things like airlines, hotels and resorts, beauties and fashion, retailers, and so much more at that link there. So you all know better than I do the local restaurants, shops, and retailers that you already have relationships with that help provide some of these materials that we're talking about at no cost to you. So hopefully some of these that I've listed and are included in the link will give you some more options that you can look into, as well as keep current relationships that you've built. So maybe we go back to the same organization all the time and say, hey, can you support this? Can you support this? This may give you a few other options that you won't have to go back to that one organization so much, because we want to prevent that burnout. And it's not like, well, we always donate to you. We want to donate to someone else. So hopefully this can help and not hurt. And that's all I got in terms of fundraising. So please feel free to type in your questions. We're going to go over a few program updates here for the remainder of the webinar. I hope you still stay on. I got some really exciting news to share. But please start typing in your questions, comments, concerns, additions. Please let us know. So tomorrow's the last day to submit data for the 2022 Volunteer Impact Report. This report's going to showcase volunteer impact from January 1st, 2021 to December 31st, 2021, so the full calendar year of last year. We only call it the 2022 report because it's being released in 2022. So reporting the data again is due tomorrow. We just need 2 key data points from you: the number of volunteers for your program and the number of volunteer activity hours. And I so appreciate everyone who's already contributed to this report. Many of you, as I look through who is on the call, have already contributed numbers and data. And thank you so much, because our numbers are amazing. Check these out. Wait. So you all are fantastic. You're amazing. Ooh, I love it so much. So we have 7,622 volunteers across the state that have been reported, and over 340,000 hours of volunteer activity. That is a huge increase from last year, and we're still recovering from the pandemic. So we're going through so many ups and downs of being opened for a few months and then having to close and then open again. So I'm so deeply appreciative to all of you and the volunteers. Of course, we can't do this without the volunteers, right? We can't have these numbers, for all your hard work and their hard work and dedication to helping older adults across the state get these services that they need. These numbers, we've increased by, I want to say, about 400 volunteers at this point, and we just got more data this morning that isn't included in this. So I think we reached, I think right now we're over the 8,000 volunteer mark once I include the data that just came in right before this call. And we're at least over 100,000 hours of volunteer service. So, oh, I'm getting goosebumps. I'm so excited. And I've mentioned this before, so I want you all to keep an eye out. We're going, our anticipated release day, our goal that I'm going to achieve this year, because last year was delayed way too much. But our anticipated release date for the 2022 report is going to be Monday, April 18th, which is going to kick off National Volunteer Appreciation Week. So thank you again. So excited for this. I'm excited just for all the years to come and how I'm going to see all of our programs grow. Something I didn't know about that I was contacted a couple months ago. Did you all know, and some of you do know because you were on another call that I talked about this, but did you know Tennessee has a specific Senior Day of Service? So it is the Tennessee Senior Citizens Day of Service. It actually started In 2019, there was a joint resolution through the House of Representatives that declared Tennessee Senior Citizen Service Day the first Saturday of May of every year. And this year, it's going to be May 7th. And Cherie Down, who I believe was Miss Senior Tennessee, I want to say in 2021, maybe 2020. I really need to look that up. But she's the one who got the resolution. She's the one who's promoting it. She's the true advocate behind this. And she's the one who reached out to me. And I'm so, so glad that she did, because we really want this to kick off and be more well received, more recognized, and just bring more awareness about this across the state. So it's really that small acts make a huge difference. So this isn't necessarily asking seniors on this Saturday to go and volunteer at an organization or do some super big, large event. It's small, could be small things like cleaning out your closet and putting or taking whatever you don't want in your closet and donating it to a local nonprofit. Maybe your senior center's having a clothing drive or a food drive or some kind of activity drive to get supplies for certain classes. You can get people engaged that way. Writing a thank you letter, making a call or checking on a neighbor. If they have a local agency that they can volunteer for, they can go volunteer there for the day. And on their website, there's about 22 different ideas. And of course, there's more than 22 ideas altogether, but just of things that people can do to get involved with Tennessee Senior Citizens Day of Service. So for more information on this event, I'm minimally involved at the moment. I'm trying to get more involved and I want to raise awareness, but they have a website. So again, the website has more information. It's got the proclamation on there and everything like that. It's got those ideas of ways to serve, and then it also has tracking. So maybe you're a senior center director and you want to get your participants involved. It's on Saturday, May 7th, so Monday, May 9th, everyone's going to come in the center, and you'll say, okay, what did you do this week? And then you can type in the activity and the service hours that your participants did that day on their website here, and then it'll all calculate out. They also have a Facebook page, and here is their contact email as well. So if you have any questions, please let me know. I can get you either in touch with Sherry, or maybe we can brainstorm some ways that we can get more older adults involved in Tennessee Senior Citizens Day of Service. Just thought it was so cool, and honestly, super embarrassed that I didn't know about it until 2022 when it was in effect in 2019. Oof, my bad. Those are the only updates I have. The last thing is don't forget to tune in for our webinar next month on Thursday, April 21st, same time. And we have Kristen Dillard from Interfaith Dental is going to talk to us about 6 main motivations of volunteers, interpreting the motivations of volunteers theoretically and practically, and theoretical, should say not theoretically, theoretical and practical considerations. So I hope you all can join us next month. And here's my contact information. Please feel free to reach out to me anytime. We're ending a little bit early today, but I'm free to stick around if anybody has any questions. I didn't see any questions come in through the chat. Please feel free to unmute yourself and we can have a discussion. But other than that, happy St. Patrick's Day. And I hope everybody has a great weekend. I'll have all these resources out in the follow-up email. I'm hoping by this afternoon, if not first thing tomorrow. So thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. And I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording just in case someone wants to ask a question and just doesn't want to be recorded. Thank you.